Welcome everyone to the work session put on by the Borough Assembly or hosted by the Borough Assembly on ranked choice voting. This is Jason Gren with Alaskans for Better Elections.
Good evening, everyone. I feel like I'm talking at my dining room here with my family. But thank you, one, for hosting me and our organization to explain some of these upcoming changes to the election. But really, just from an Alaskan to other Alaskans, thank you for your interest in wanting to learn about this, because obviously we want as many people voting in our elections. We want people to feel confident about how they vote and feel confident about their vote counting, and all of this ties together. And so thank you for taking the time out, either online, in person, or maybe watching later about this information, especially on an absolutely gorgeous day. If we could all be outside and give this presentation with dinner, that would be perfect, but we'll make it fun anyways here in town. But thank you again so much. So our presentation tonight will go through the two changes that are happening in our upcoming elections, two major changes that voters are going to be facing when they vote this year. And we'll talk a little bit about something you might have heard called a special election that we're also having this year. The first time in 50 years here in Alaska. That's probably why they call it special. They don't happen that often. But if we can start the PowerPoint presentation, we'll go through slide by slide real quick. And we can go to the next slide. So we'll talk really quickly just about myself, not that anyone cares, but just so you know that I'm a real person who lives in Alaska. I'm a fourth generation Alaskan, born and raised in Anchorage. I've got 3 kids. They're all in elementary school. I've been traveling a lot, and they wonder why my luggage is like empty and just sits by the door nowadays, because I fill it up, and we're doing a lot of education work around the state. But a few years ago, I had the honor as well as serving in the state legislature as an independent lawmaker in the state house, and really learned a lot about Alaskans and their cares and their issues and their priorities. And really, it helps guide my passion for wanting to increase voter participation and make sure that voters are part of this process. So really happy to be talking to you tonight. I'll explain a little bit about what's happening, what our group in the division elections is doing now, the two major changes facing voters, and then ways you as community leaders and people involved in trying to improve the quality of life in your neighborhood and wanting to make sure everyone has a great future, how you can help make sure our elections are successful. So next slide. Right now, the division elections, the Department of Law, and our group and many other groups are working on both the implementation and the education process of these new election processes. And they kind of go hand in hand. Next slide. The implementation process is things like software upgrades, just like on your smartphone. If you get an alert that you have to upgrade some of the details and the bugs that need to get worked out. We have to do that with our ballot machines, since this is a new system. Luckily, the state of Alaska had software that is allowed to, or is able to do that software upgrade. So it was very, very easy. Just takes some time, but we're doing that with all of our ballot machines. Going through the regulation process, make sure that T's are crossed, I's are dotted, make sure that the intention of the law is matching up with what's on state statute, and doing things like purchasing new tabulators. There was about 120 communities around the state of Alaska were still doing hand counting for their ballots on election night. With ranked choice voting, you can do hand counts. It just takes longer. And so this is just a way to speed up the process. And it actually adds to the transparency as well, because it makes sure that there is a human element and a software computer element to it to make sure when you're doing the counting correctly. And then, as I mentioned, working with the Department of Law to make sure things are going smoothly with all of the legal processes. Next slide. From the education standpoint, as I mentioned, our group, Alaskans for Better Elections, is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit, which means our focus is on education. It also means that we do this in a nonpartisan way. We won't be endorsing candidates. We don't endorse parties or platforms or give favor to one side or the other. It's really working on the education process and making sure that every voter, regardless of their political leanings, has the same information. We do this in ways like presentations like tonight, but we also do it in videos and webinars and podcasts, and putting together meet and greets and mock elections, and putting out information like sample ballots, and everything we can think of that makes it easy for people to learn and understand this process. We want to make sure that no matter how you best get information, that you're able to have that resource in front of you. We're doing that with community organizations. We're working with groups like the AERP and the Municipal League and Get Out the Native Vote, and all sorts of different groups around the state of Alaska, so that make sure that their networks and their clients and their membership, their leadership groups all have the same information. Because when we're all kind of working together, it makes it a lot easier and a lot more efficient, and make sure that we're using the same information.
Oh, hold on, sorry. Somehow, there we go.
This is my 188th presentation in the past 12 months. And I've seen all sorts of random wacky things happen. Not a problem. Next slide, please. So what are the big changes that are coming this year? You might have heard about them, you might have questions about them, but there's two big ones that voters are going to be facing. The first one, next slide, is the open primary system. Next slide. The open primary system, Alaska actually used to have the open primary system for a long time, up until the year 2000. It switched, and for the past 20 years, we've used something that's a closed primary system, or a semi-closed primary system. If you voted in Alaska in the last 20 years, you probably recall, they ask you what ballot do you want, or your party affiliation, and you get a certain ballot based on your party affiliation. Well, with open primaries, next slide. Open primaries is just an election that does not require a voter to declare their party affiliation. So now moving forward, every voter in the state of Alaska, obviously depending on where they live, they will get the same ballot. All candidates will appear on the same ballot. So you as a Democrat, me as a Republican, someone else as a nonpartisan, I'm nonpartisan, but all of us combined, when we go in, we don't have to ask for a certain ballot. We don't have to tell anyone our party affiliation. We will all receive the same ballot. All candidates will appear on that same ballot. This is a little hard to read with some of the light, but you can kind of see here on the map of the United States, a lot of states use an open primary system. About 33 states actually use an open primary system. Washington and California use something called a top two nonpartisan open primary system. What they're finding in a top two nonpartisan open primary system is that generally two candidates of the same party will move on to the general election. And if you're not someone who usually votes that party, or you are registered in that party and you move and you don't like those two parties, it's hard to want to go vote when it's only two Democrats and you're Republican, or if there's two Republicans and you're Democrat, hard to sometimes want to vote. So our system was designed to include more choices and more nuanced in party platforms. So we have the first in the country top four nonpartisan open primary system. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. Next slide. You can see here, this is a sample ballot from the state of Alaska on their primary election, what it looks like. Very similar to what you've seen in the past. It's got all five races on here. It has a bubble next to someone's name, and very, very simple. One other change that is coming to our elections, though, that people are starting to understand more of, is that the governor and lieutenant governor will be running together. You can see here on the bottom left-hand corner, the governor and lieutenant governor are running as a team. In our state's history, usually the governor and lieutenant governor would run separately. The winners of their primary system would be matched up in late August, and then they would run together till November. And really that short time frame, only about 3 months or so of someone working together as a team, doesn't give voters the great understanding of how they might work together, their strengths and weaknesses, what they're focused on together. We've elected governors and lieutenant governors who don't like each other, but they have to work together for the next 4 years. So this system now, the governor and lieutenant governor get to team up a lot earlier than usual. They get to show their strengths, get to campaign together, travel around the state, answer questions together. We feel that this change is going to be something that Alaskans actually really, really like. It also is a logistical challenge if you were running an open primary for two separate races and then matched up people of different parties because of how they placed 1, 2, 3, 4. Logistically, it wouldn't really work either as well. And so this system matches up with the new open primary and ranked choice voting. But again, that ballot, just pick one candidate per race. Very simple, very easy, and very much like you've seen. Next slide. So as I mentioned, all voters will receive the same ballot. So here in Petersburg, you won't have to ask for a separate different ballot, or you won't be confused on who's on what ballot. As I mentioned, when I ran as a nonpartisan, I actually never showed up on a primary because I didn't run in the primary for the Democrats or the Republicans. I ran as a nonpartisan. Now, as a nonpartisan, candidates will appear on the primary ballot together. So again, You vote for one person in each race. The top 4 vote getters will move on to the general election. If there's 2 or 3 or 4 candidates in that election, obviously all 2 or 3 or 4 of those candidates would move on. But if there's 5 or 6 or 7, like in the governor's race or the U.S. Senate race, that only the top 4 will move on. And that's regardless of their party affiliation. You could have 4 Democrats move on. You could have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats move on. Any combination of candidates, regardless of their party affiliation, will move on to the general election. So what happens in the general election? Next slide, please. So that's where change number 2 comes into play. Change number 2 is ranked choice voting general elections. Ranked choice voting, all it means is you get to rank the candidates in an order of your preference, of how you like them. You can rank as many as you like, all 4. You can rank as few as you like, meaning just 1. But you as a voter get to choose how you rank the candidates. You can love them, like them, be okay with them, and hate them. You can love all of them, and you got to figure out how to rank them. Or you can just like one barely, any way you want to order your candidates, you can. 1, 2, 3, 4. We can go to the next slide. Next slide. So this map is showing where ranked choice voting is used across the United States. Ranked choice voting has been used in several countries, many countries actually around the world, like Australia, Ireland, Scotland have used it for a long, long time. But in the United States, it's still relatively new, but a lot of places are using it. You can see here on the map that many different states and cities use it. Maine uses it for their state and federal races. They're the only other state that uses it at a statewide level. Many states in the South actually use it for their military and overseas voters, just as a way to make sure that their ballots come back timely and before the elections are over. 23 cities in Utah just used it for the first time this fall. New York City used it in the mayor's race this past summer. Cities like Minneapolis, Santa Fe, San Francisco use it. And then other party organizations use it. The Utah Republican Party just uses it for their nominating process. The Virginia Republican Party uses it. In fact, the governor who won Virginia's gubernatorial race, Governor Youngkin, he won. He came through a ranked choice voting nominating process through that party. So different ways that people are in and states and organizations are using it. But Alaska will be the first state to use it in a combined with the top 4 open primary system. So, next slide. This is the sampled general ballot from the state of Alaska. You can see here, looks like a lot of bubbles, and we'll zoom in here in a moment. You can see what it looks like. But it's got the instructions on the top, and then it has each of the races going down the ballot. It's got names on the left, bubbles on the right, and you don't have to fill in all the bubbles. That's what's really great about it. It's not like taking a test or anything. It's really quite straightforward. But we'll show that closer, I think, next slide. Oh, so nope, this is good. So how do we use our ballot? So you see the ballot, you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, how do I fill this thing out? It's really as simple as 1, 2, 3. Step 1 is in that race. Let's say it's the U.S. Senate race, and you go, okay, I have my top candidate, and I find their name, and I find first choice, and I fill in that bubble. If I have a second choice, you don't have to have a second choice, but if you have a second choice, it just has to be different than your first choice, and you fill in second choice next to that person's name. And then in your third and fourth choice, again, you're not required to fill that in, but if you do have a third and fourth choice, you just fill in the third choice bubble, fourth choice bubble, make sure they're different than the other candidates. Next slide. So here's an example of someone using their ballot correctly. This is the U.S. Senate race between bear, moose, eagle, and whale. They decided to fill in all 4 choices. They chose moose first, whale second, bear third, and eagle fourth. You'll see here there's also an option for a write-in candidate. Obviously, Alaska has a history of write-in candidates and other types of candidates, like third-party candidates and independent candidates. But for a write-in, wanted to make sure that that is still available, and so that's why there's a 5th choice there. But again, very simple, 1, 2, 3, 4, just make sure that each bubble matches with one candidate. Next slide. This is something we don't recommend doing. This will actually spoil part of your ballot. So in this race, this person decided this is a race between summer, winter, spring, and fall. And they decided that I love winter so much, I'm going to give them all of my bubbles, all of my choices. I'm going to fill in every choice I can for winter. You would put this in the machine would spit it out. Why would it spit it out? Why would it reject it? Well, it would count for your first choice for winter, but it doesn't know where to assign the other choices to. Obviously it looks like there's choices have been filled in, but it doesn't know where to assign. So it would reject your ballot. If you've ever had a rejected ballot, it's very simple to fix. Usually a poll worker comes over, asks what happened, ask if you would like to change your ballot. You can do that, or you have the option to put it right back in the machine and say, no, this is exactly what I wanted. But this would spoil part of your ballot. Your ballot would count for the first choice for Winter, but it wouldn't help Winter in any other way. It wouldn't help any other candidate either. So next slide. This is another thing that will spoil your ballot. You've decided that you love summer, winter, spring, and fall all the same. You can't decide. Every candidate is just, you love them all. And so you've given them all your first choice. Well, in the same way, you put this in the machine, it would be rejected. And because it doesn't know who to assign your choice to, it doesn't know what candidate needs to get your first choice. And so you'd have the opportunity to fix it, or you can put it in the machine, but it would not count in this particular race. None of your votes would count. Next slide. And this is something that doesn't happen often, but it is also something that spoils part of your ballot. You would put this in the machine. It would count for winter in your first choice, but fall, for whatever reason, this voter decided I'm going to rank fall fourth. The machine doesn't know if you meant to choose a second choice or if this was a mistake. And so it would spit it out. The state statute does say if you do skip more than 2 choices, it does invalidate the rest of that part of that ballot. So it would count for your first choice Winter, but it would not give any sort of ranking to any other candidate. Next slide. So looking at this is our example. Summer, winter, spring, and fall are all running together. It's election night. We've closed the polls. It's passed. All the votes are in now, and we're going to show you how votes are now tabulated. Next slide. So you can see here, winter, summer, fall, and spring. We've counted all their votes. With ranked choice voting, the goal is to receive 50% plus 1. That's how you are declared the winner. And in our state, we've had a long history of candidates who have 7 different governors have won with less than 50%. No U.S. Senate candidate has won with more than 50% since 2002. As I mentioned, we have a long history of third-party candidates and independent candidates, 3-way, 4-way races. And so to show that we're sending someone to Juneau or to DC with the majority support of the district or of the state, ranked choice voting says you have to get 50% plus 1. So how do we do that? Well, in this race, you can see the first round votes are in. No one received 50% plus 1. There's that black bar at the top of this graphic. That's our 50% line. No one received it. So what do we do? How do we get there? Well, we do that by eliminating candidates. We eliminate the last place candidate and we look at their ballots. We say, who did they rank number 2? And then we move those ballots to the other candidates. So in this case, Summer is in last place. So sorry, Summer, we're going to eliminate you. We're going to look at all the people who gave you a number 1 choice. And we're going to look at the ballots and say, who did they rank number 2? So next slide. So we move. So winter gained a few, fall gained a few, spring gained quite a lot. But again, no one has that 50%. So we have to eliminate the next last place candidate. So in that case, this would be spring. So we look at whoever ranked spring number 1. We say, who did they rank number 2? And we look at people who ranked summer number 1 and spring number 2. We say, who did they rank number 3? So we look at all those ballots, we eliminate spring, and we move on to the next slide, and we show you that fall gained quite a bit and was able to get past that 50% plus 1 threshold. And in this case, fall would now be declared the winner in this race. If you remember on the first slide, winter and fall were very close. Winter maybe had 34%, winter had 34%, fall had 32%. In a traditional race, a 4-way race like that, winter would have been declared the winner with 34% of the votes, which means, if you do math, 66% of the area actually actively voted against winter. They said, we don't want winter. We want the other candidates. But they would go to Juneau with 34%. They'd serve your district, and they won with 34%, meaning maybe they only had to reach out to certain types of voters, your voters only in their party. In ranked choice voting, what's great about it is you now have to, as a candidate, you have to earn those second and third place votes to get past that 50% threshold. So how do you do that? Go next slide. We go next slide too. How do we do that? Well, with ranked choice voting, you have to now reach out as a candidate. You have to reach out to other voters that maybe you traditionally did not. You have to reach out to voters who maybe aren't even in your party registration. If I'm a Republican, and I can't get 50% plus one in that first round, I'm going to have to reach out to a lot of other voters to see if I can get that second place vote, that third place vote. So what it does is allows for candidates to focus more on issues, reach out to more voters, and you as a voter are now a sought after commodity, and there's competition among candidates. Competition usually brings out the best of something. If it's in business or in sports, competition usually drives people to do better. So hopefully with candidates, better elections sometimes means less negative advertising, means reaching out to more voters who they've maybe not done traditionally. And so it's a kind of a two-way street in terms of candidates are now working harder, voters have more choices, and hopefully that helps get better outcomes in Juneau. I'll knock on wood as I say that. What it also does is eliminate that spoiler effect. If you've voted before in a three-way or a four-way race, you go, well, I really like that one person, but they're not going to win. They don't have much money, or they're not the front runner, or they don't have the backing of one of the major parties, but I really like them. They're my friend or my neighbor. I want to vote for them, but I don't want to waste my vote, or I don't want them to be a spoiler, or you know, I gotta vote strategically and not really who I want to vote for. Now with ranked choice voting, that eliminates that, because you can vote for your friend who's probably not going to win. And when he's eliminated, you have that backup choice that says, well, I'm going to vote for the front runner in the one party that I like, not as much as my friend, but I like, and I don't mind if he goes to Juneau and represents me. So it eliminates a spoiler effect. It eliminates that wasted vote. And really, as I mentioned, what it does is have candidates, they have to build that winning coalition. They need that 50% plus one. They have to reach out to other voters. They have to find common ground. They have to talk about issues that maybe have been ignored, or talk to voters that have been ignored, and really engage more on a public level. Go next slide. To recap really quickly, if you've read the news or talked to your neighbors or paid attention to social media, you know that elections are coming up, and those elections are different than they've ever been before in the state of Alaska. Our group and many other groups are preparing and educating and trying our best to get the word out. The two major changes, number one is our open primary system, where now all voters will receive the same ballot. There's no longer a choice of ballot at the primary, and all candidates will be on that ballot. You get to pick one person in that race, even if there's 48 people on a race, like the U.S. House special election coming up. But then the top 4 vote getters will move on regardless of their party affiliation. In the general election, where those top 4 people move on, you'll use ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting, you get to pick one or all 4. It's up to you entirely. If you love someone, like someone, someone's okay, that's 3 rankings. If you just love someone and don't like anyone else, that's 1 ranking. But you as a voter get to choose how you get to rank up to 4 candidates in that race. All of that round by round total that I showed you here in those graphics, that'll be released to the public from the division elections, so you can see how each round went and who earned what votes. And then again, that winner will receive majority support of the district or the state when they are serving us in Juneau or Washington, D.C. We go next slide. These are the dates for some of the special elections, the one special election that is coming up, and the other elections that we have this fall. June 11th, the special election to replace the late Congressman Young, that will be entirely done by mail. The division elections is now mailing out ballots as we speak. It will have 48 candidates on it. You get to pick one, just one. Don't rank anyone, don't fill in more than one, just rank one. Put that back in the mail. The postage is paid for by the state of Alaska. You do need to get it witnessed, which means someone else has to sign it. Anyone who's over 18 can sign that for you. It can be a family member, a neighbor, anyone, as long as they're over 18, but get that in the mail before June 11th. The top 4 vote getters, again, regardless of their party affiliation, will move on to the special general election in August, which is going to be combined with our primary election that we usually take place in August. So on that ballot, you will be ranking in the special primary election and voting for just one in the regular primary election. So even I get messed up. Yes. In August, you will be ranking in the special general election, and you will be picking one in the regular primary election. That'll be great. That'll be a lot of fun. No, Alaskans are smart. We're going to be able to get this. I have no worries about that. Then in November, when you vote, all of the elections you'll be voting for in November will be using ranked choice voting. We can go next slide. if you haven't seen the ballot for the special election, this is what it looks like. This is what you'll be receiving in the mail. It does fit on one sheet of paper. Magically, I think if we had 2 more candidates, I don't know if they would have fit on one piece of paper, but all of these candidates fit. It is in alphabetical order, so once you know who you are voting for, it is easy to find. They do move the order of the candidates randomly in each district, but it is still alphabetical. You can see here, I just picked one. All of these examples are on the Division of Elections website, but it starts in, I picked like District 10, and District 10 starts with C, and so that's why this one starts with C. District 35 might start with H, but again, it's alphabetical, so it is easy-ish to find. But again, just pick one, pop it in the mail, get it witnessed by June 11th. Next slide. So what we ask people, this is a lot of information and lots of dates and lots of things for people to know. So we ask people how and what they can do to make sure these elections are successful. If you call into talk radio or like writing letters to the editor or like posting on social media, what's the best way to share this information with your family and friends and networks and organizations that you're a part of? Like I mentioned, I give presentations like this all the time. We love sharing this information. So if you're part of a group that would like a presentation like this, or even a presentation from the Division of Elections, they're happy to do those as well. But making sure that you share the correct information, making sure that the information you share is been vetted by the Division of Elections or vetted from a group, a nonpartisan group like ours, to make sure that you're not confusing anyone or you're making it more complex than it needs to be. There's a lot of great FAQs and videos and, like I said, sample ballots and stuff on the Division of Elections website. Our website with Alaskans for Better Elections, we have a lot of information as well that's really great to share. But we want to make sure that how people learn, the resources that people like using, that those are available and easy to access. And so please reach out to us, reach out to Division of Elections, get that information and share it as widely as possible, because those elections are coming sooner rather than we thought. And on days like this, when we'd all rather be outside, biking or fishing or anything, sometimes we forget about these elections, but they're incredibly important to the future of our state. We want to make sure that every person knows how to fill out their ballot correctly and make sure that they vote on time. So thank you so much. I think next slide says, thank you. And so I really appreciate you hosting us tonight. My contact information is on the next slide. And I'll make sure that you have that and we can pass that out to anyone who asks, or if they need follow up or anything, happy to call or text or email, whatever people have. And so I'll open it up to the crowd for Q&A now, but again, really appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
On.
Marco, there we go. Okay. First of all, thank you. Clerk Thompson and I were talking about, with close to 50 candidates, there's usually a candidate pamphlet or something like that that's included. Something like that going out with the mail ballots for the special election?
There will be, yes. Okay. Yeah, it's incredibly tough. You can imagine working with the Division of Elections. First of all, the logistics and the things that we don't think, like paper supply chain issues, getting enough ballots to even print envelopes, special sized envelopes to print has been a tremendous hassle. So now creating a voter pamphlet with 50 names and information on that and mailing that out, it's a tremendous burden. So it does take time, but they are getting information out there. Yep.
Yes, thank you very much for showing up. Chelsea and I both appreciate it.
I know we could have just had a beer or something, just kind of talk through this. But
yeah. No. Thanks for coming. So what is this going to cause, like, for people like Debbie that runs our local election? Does the current voting machines and software, will it be able to tabulate the results easily? Is that where the software revisions come in for the existing machinery?
Debbie probably has a better update than I do, but I know that the software, that process has been happening. It might have already has happened, but luckily the software that the state uses was a simple enough software upgrade. It wasn't like new machines and they had to do this whole drivers and everything. It was a normal upgrade, normal software upgrade process, but Debbie probably has a better answer.
Dave, also, I would like to clarify, this is really only for the state and federal elections. It will not affect our municipal elections.
So, and you don't normally count the
N-
state and federal results, correct?
I am not involved in that. I will help when they need help. It has been Mary Clemens the last few years that has run the state elections. And she is on via Zoom, watching this presentation right now. So I know, I have heard that the ballot readers are all ready to handle the new process.
Okay, thanks.
And I know Save Alaska was doing testing and all sorts of kind of ways to trick it and make kind of manipulate it earlier this fall, November, December, doing all sorts of testing, and then training poll workers, things like that. And then also, I know the Save Alaska will have posters at each individual booth on what not to do and how to do it. When you go in to get your ballot, they'll have people, posters and ways they can explain it. So again, the hope is, obviously, this is what the work we're doing, the state's doing. The first time you see this ballot or go vote, it's not the first time you've heard about these changes. Again, we tell people get a sample ballot and fill it out, practice it. If you're really kind of nervous or don't really, don't want to screw up when you're at the polling location. But the machines, it's thank goodness for computers. Who could, and it happens really, really quick, actually, the tabulation. But you can do hand counting. The state statute that says things like recounts, hand counts still exists. It will just take longer if there's ever a hand count, recount that needs to happen.
I'm excited to hear about the posters inside of the booths, because my first thought when you were showing the different examples of voided ballots was, if you have a candidate that you're really, really excited about, and this is your first election, I could totally see somebody just going, no, this is my guy, and going all the way across the board. And so is that kind of do you have an idea of what will be in those booths?
Yeah, as I mentioned, all this information has been vetted by DOE. I'm not out here just talking, making stuff up. And so using these examples, they use these examples in their presentations, things like that. And knowing that, again, if you've worked elections, people do wacky things on ballots. People circle a name and write yes or something without filling in the bubble, or they do things that you would go, why did you think to do that? Here's the instructions. But again, people are excited, or they first time voters, or have they voted that way in a certain other jurisdiction? This is how they do it. And so the what to do, you obviously want to show people what to do first, but there will be examples on those posters, or at least when you pick up your ballot, of what not to do. And again, trained on why it gets rejected, because usually if it gets rejected, you can kind of tell really quick. But with this, some of the new system, you have to kind of go, wait, they skipped 2. Okay, yeah, that's why. So training poll workers, things like that will be pretty important.
I'm sorry. It's just so funny that this new system is being implemented along with the special election that is the first time in 50 years. Like, what are the odds? So it's just a little manic produce. I'm sure for you all, we're just like, are you kidding me?
Well, and when we were talking about this special election in August, combining the 2 elections and I applaud the state of Alaska for how they handled it. Again, as we mentioned, paper supply, poll worker shortages, things like this. From a logistics standpoint, it makes absolute sense to do them on the same day, the same ballot, things like that. Voter turnout, it makes sense, but it does add a little bit of confusion to have 2 different types of races on one different day, or same day, but 2 different. And that's why we're out here talking. And that's what, and again, I think once people kind of see the ballot, it won't be that difficult. And that, seeing a sample ballot, people usually, when they see it, go, oh, that makes a lot of sense, or, oh, that's not as hard as I thought, or it's not that complicated. But that August special general and regular primary, one for the history books, that's for sure.
Well, then just the record number of candidates as well in the primary,
Yeah.
just the fact that the top 4 are people that might be able to get just 10% of the overall vote each, but then, hey, they're the top 4, so they're going forward.
Yeah, and people have asked about that too. Like, well, if there's 48 candidates, top 4, what if they get 12, 10, 8%, and then someone gets 2% and they're 4th? Under this system, we'll never see 48 candidates on any other race ever again. We've never seen that many before, and it is a little bit of a, again, special election. But it also, as that might be something that people point to say, that's not really good. If someone only can move on with 12%, In the other system that previously, party leaders would have put forward one person, and that's who you would have got to choose from. Is one person per party. There would have been 4 or 5 choices. And in the same way, in the old system, if no one won in the primary, they'd all the top 2 would go on to the general election. So it's very similar to our old system. But this system now provides so much more choice. Personally, there's 10 or 12 people. I'm like, oh, I could vote for any of those. Different than what our system is. And as we've talked about, the reason I'm passionate about is it really is kind of for voters first. Voters now get all these choices. I mean, if you look at a restaurant menu and there's just so many, sometimes the overwhelming choice can be like, whoa, how do I pick? Some people like that, some people don't. But from a voter perspective, I think, again, we talked about competition and kind of the nuance of maybe debate, or, if there's 6 different Republicans running, they all don't fit in one, square. There's different ideas and vision for even within that party. And so from a voter standpoint, I think it's a really good thing. But yeah, the top 4 vote getters are probably going to be in that 8 to 12, 15%. And again, so very special, something for the history books. Yeah.
Clerk Thompson, are any of the Zoom people having questions?
I see no hands up.
Well, I know we're recording this, and in a week this won't make any sense, or I won't be there. But tomorrow, if anyone's online, tomorrow we're going to be at Salty's at 9 a.m. just answering questions. I'll buy you a coffee. Just come and either pick my brain or ask a question. Happy to answer anything, or just kind of chat through this with anyone. So 9 to 10:30 we'll be there with some coffee. So feel free to stop by.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Jason.
Thanks.
All right, we'll sign off. Thanks everyone for joining us.